tuning in to Compound Performance Radio. Today we have our guest, Sharelle Grant, with us. Sharelle, thank you very much for joining us. If you could please give us a little introduction to yourself, to who you are and what got you into fitness, I think that'd be awesome for everybody to hear.
Thanks, guys. It's really great to be here. I'm excited for this episode to be able to sit down and talk with you both. It's such an interesting question when people say, can you just summarize like in 10 seconds who you are? It's quite challenging.
You can
but
go
I
much
guess
longer. It's okay.
Do we have time?
We don't like talking. Go for it. As long as you want.
Right. Well, I guess at the moment I work in the online coaching space as a women's health and fitness coach, and I've been doing that full time now since September. It was actually during sort of the pandemic and COVID that really pushed me into this space. So yeah, now at the moment I'm working, like I said, as an online coach. I work with just women, and yeah, that's really what I do at the moment.
So what brought you into the fitness space itself? Just how'd you get into your own personal fitness? Like, what's your background from that perspective?
Yeah, so when I first started in, I guess, my own fitness journey, like most women, I guess, I got into the gym pretty much just to lose a little bit of weight. I think everyone really goes in for more, or I guess females, more aesthetic purposes. So when I first started, I started out running actually. So I got into running because that's what you do when you want to lose a little bit of body fat. You start running and burning calories. But it was actually running that introduced me to performance-based stuff, because each week I would, be working on my cadence, like how quick I could run, the kilometers that I was averaging. And I actually got quite obsessed with running. I was doing sort of 40 or 50 Ks a week. I did a couple of half marathons. I was quite good at it. But after a period of time, I started to get some like lingering niggles and some like injuries. And my running coach at the time told me I should start getting into resistance training. So that was the first step that I did, getting into the gym. And then slowly over time, I just started to enjoy, I guess, the lifting component, the resistance training more than the running. And as you do, I joined a 12-week challenge and I got really incredible results from that. My body responded really well, and my whole mindset from exercise shifted to now training. And that's when my body really did start to develop. I started to build muscle. I spent hours reading bodybuilding.com and T Nation and consuming all that sort of content, didn't we all? And then, yeah, I guess it led me into the competing space. There was a gentleman at the gym that I used to train at, and I used to call him Gym Dad. And he would always say to me, he'd be like, have you ever thought about bodybuilding? Have you ever thought about bodybuilding? And I was like, I couldn't do that. I could not get on stage in a bikini, but he did plant that seed. And then over a period of time, I was just researching like the WBFF and some of those fitness pros in that space. And I thought, you know what, I wouldn't mind doing that. So at the time, I had no idea that comp prep coaches even existed. So I prepped myself. I got myself to stage, and I ended up winning the novice category, the under 30s and the overalls. And from that, I was just hooked. So now I've done about 10 shows. I'm now a professional with the WBFF, and I compete at a pro level. And that's where my story started. I know it's a long one, sorry.
That's like it's always great when we get the podcast introductions, because your podcast introduction was just like everybody else's becomes. Hi, my name is Sharelle and I train people on the internet. And then it's like, okay, cool. What got you to this point? And then there's the whole backstory that goes into it, which is really cool, because I think that's one of the cool things about training and about fitness in general is most of us have a very similar story and a very similar reason why we got into this and got into this. And it's really cool to see and put people as almost like an endpoint for people who are just starting their journey now, where they can see, oh, cool. Well, they didn't just start off like this. This was a process where she started off running and doing marathons and half marathons, and then became what she is now. So do you still feel like you have any of those other like performance goals with running or cardio, or do you just like go full-time training now?
Full-time training. I guess I'm very results driven, and I'm aware of that. So that's, I guess, when I got into the running, like I'll just try and beat myself. And then when I got into the gym, I initially started like with strength-based goals, which I think are amazing. I think everyone should have performance-based goals. Now I'm sort of like in between, like I train like a bodybuilder, but I guess I'm just very results driven in how I like to look at training as a whole and watch how I progress through mesocycles and training years and beat myself on stage each year in just the smallest ways. So for me, it's like fitness is that outlet where I can like push myself to my limits and be better each time. So I'm aware of that and I use that as like a tool to keep me motivated.
Very cool. Yeah. It's always the other stereotype we always see in fitness is obviously, kind of that old stereotype where it's just a bunch of meatheads kind of running around. And then, you sit down and you talk to somebody and everything's so calculated and so empirical and so measurable and data driven, with most of the people we talk about and talk to on this podcast. And, that's always amazing to me too, because I think that also sets a really good precedent to, what Matt was saying, like maybe some of the people who are new to the fitness space, but, see you online or see, other professionals online and they realize that there is a plan, right? There is a method to the madness and you are tracking things and you do have actual measurable goals, as well as aesthetic goals. And I think that's always kind of a really cool process as well, just to hear more about like what people are really looking for. I've certainly never competed in that sense. I know Matt's worked with a few competitors before in the past, but when you kind of go out and you do start breaking down mesocycles and macrocycles, like what's that process look like for you and, just for yourself and for your clients?
Yeah, very well said. And I think like, I guess everyone gets into the gym, or I know I did starting out like exercising. And I was speaking about this the other day, like everyone starts out just exercising and there has to come a point where you start training. And I think for a lot of women, that is just such an incredible change in mindset as well as physique. Like a lot of people use exercise as the tool to get to their body composition goals, when in fact they really need to address the training side of things. So, hypertrophy is quite forgiving. I find like in the bodybuilding style space, there is so much noise, right? There is so much noise. And like what you said, there's a lot of people like throwing around a lot of big ideas about what's optimal. And for me, like, I just like to keep things really simple. I look at myself for, I guess, muscle building goals and think, well, what part of my physique do I need to bring up? What can I put on maintenance? What's my injury backgrounds? Like what risk to benefit ratio for exercise selection, for example? And that's what I take into consideration with a lot of my clientele as well. So I think like what you said, it's a lot of the objective driven stuff, but it's also like psychological as well when it comes to training. And this is something that I'm really big on, is that like women sort of need to be coached a bit differently to men. We can't just go in and have like these strict numbers that we hit. There's so many other factors that need to come into play about how we enjoy training, because it's such a huge component of it, as well as understanding things around like training around your cycle, which I'm also really big on. But these are all things in biofeedback that I look at when it comes to my own training.
So you brought up a really interesting point there about the difference in mindset and the shift in mindset and the shift in results between people who are just exercising and that are just training, or that are actually starting to train. So with your clientele, how do you start shifting them from that mindset of just coming in and being a casual exerciser into somebody who's looking to start training for real?
Yeah, really good question. A lot of the women that I work with or tend to attract are quite high achievers. So I work with a lot of females that are coming from that challenge background, or going all in or all or nothing mindset. So they're training sort of 5-6 days a week, anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours. And they just think that working harder is what they need to do to get their result. And so for me, it's sort of been like, cool, like, what have you been doing? And they say, okay, I'm training like 6 days a week, 2 hours, all this cardio, eating 1,200 calories. And I'm sort of like, well, how's that going for you? And it's usually they're not achieving the result that they want. But I always take this type of clients through this period where I'll strip all the junk volume away, and I'll be like, you're training 4 days a week. And it's really hard for them a lot of the times to go from even like 5 or 6 days to now looking at 4 training sessions with, nowhere near the volume that they were doing. And I don't know what it is about women's fitness programs. When I was doing some market research, it's almost like volume just doubles, reps 15 to 20, 6 days a week, cardio on top of that. And I'm like, why are we being trained like this? It's no surprise that we just adapt to that volume, and it's all just junk volume anyways. So for me, I like to strip back a lot of the volume to start with, obviously feed them more. And then I do a lot of education with my my clients around like working sets, warm-up weights, what that looks like, proper warm-ups, recovery, sleep, rest time. So I like to train them like what you would an athlete. And I think that that's the way that we should all sort of be looking at training. There is a portion that exercise is great, and there's benefits to just exercising for some people, mental health and just movement. But for people that actually want a result, and they just think that working harder, it's really about having the knowledge, the skill set, and the strategy, not just always flocking yourself.
That's one of the things that I like the point that you brought up about volume and stripping out all the junk volume, because there is this obsession in the fitness industry with more being better and more volume. The next session is more, next week is more, next block is more. And we talk, Kyle and I talk about this in our group mentorship and Powerlifting Evolved very often, where if that was true, then like Ronnie Coleman is still not done with his leg workout from like 1990. Like he's still got like 10 sets left. He's not finished yet. So, but the problem is, and this is one of the problems that I always see as a coach too, is like you talked about, adjusting your clientele to that mindset that you don't have to do that much. You can be just as successful with 3 sets or 2. Like the worst thing that I've ever done is written out 2 sets of like 8 for a client. They're like, what the hell am I, like, what am I doing with this? Why am I wasting my time? It's like, no, you'll be fine. Like I promise you'll be good. Yeah. Like, trust me. So what are the conversations that you have with them, especially dealing with, like you were talking about, women who are dealing with 5 sets of 20 plus reps because we don't want to get bulky, quote unquote. Like, how do you get them more into that mindset of being like, no, it is okay to do less, eat more, and train heavier?
Yeah. I still laugh because I'm like, it's 2021. Why are we still thinking that weights make us bulky? Like, I can't even believe that is still a thing. And for like I was like, it's not, but there actually is still a huge percentage of the population that genuinely believe that. And I'm like, girls, muscles don't tone, they get bigger and smaller. Like we need to start thinking more cerebrally about training as a whole. Like we're not different just because our gender's different. We're still muscles and bones. So I guess a big part of the way I like to do this is a lot of my clientele trust me when they come in. So I lead by example, and I say, look, I train 4 days a week and I'm like a professional bodybuilder in my division. If I can do this, you can too. So I think leading by example is really important. I love testing, like, I'm like, I wonder how little I can do to maintain glutes at the moment. Like, I love doing that. My mentality is less is more. And if you can get away with doing less, like get outside and go for a walk, like stop being in the gym and like living that as your lifestyle. And I think what we saw with COVID as well is like, when the gym gets stripped away or when things happen, like you can't lose your identity just because you can't train. Like there has to be other components for you. And now that we know that you can maintain like muscle on like 1/9 of the volume or something ridiculous, like it was almost like that all that stuff happened. And now people are like, oh, like, do we need to be doing this much volume? Do we? And so with my clientele, I like to say, let's make what you're doing more efficient. Let's work on getting you stronger. And this comes from my own personal experience, probably about, I think it was 18 months or 2 years ago. I was the exact same, like 4 or 5 sets of every exercise. And I developed hamstring tendonitis, of course. So that required me to pull back, pull back a lot of my training volume and focus more on intensity and sort of recovery as well. But what I found was getting back into training with reduced frequency and volume, I just grew so much. My body responded so well, and it made me sort of reconsider how I look at training volume and really think that less is more.
Yeah. And I think, Matt and I we talk with our groups a lot, and we end up training a lot of coaches. And one of the biggest problems that a lot of coaches have is they're inside of the gym all day. And, it's like they have if they have a 3-hour break, they will work out for 2 hours and 45 minutes and then like take a quick shower, drink a shake, and go train their next client. And, we'll get them on programs. And that's the response we get a lot of the time is like, where's the rest of it?
I only trained for 40 minutes today. What am I doing?
That's it. You know, it's like, that's enough, you know.
Go read a book, bro.
Yeah. You know, but we tell them to do the same exact thing you're talking. It's like, go take a walk, you know,
like
go get some sun, like less training, more life. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that whole volume intensity relationship is something a lot of trainers and just a lot of people don't understand really well. And kind of what Matt said with that example of like the 2x8, you can make a 2x8 really crappy,
really hard.
if you're picking the right load. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And we'll have the conversation. It's like, if you can do 20 reps of it, it might not be worth doing in a lot of cases, right? Depending on your adaptation. You know, so I think that's a huge point. And I think that's super valuable, especially working primarily with females, because they tend to get kind of spoon fed that more so than men do, because societal norms and all that good stuff.
I remember inheriting a female client before I started working with Kyle, and I looked at her program and it was just like 12 exercises, 5 sets of everything. I'm like, what are you
inheriting?
Inheriting.
I'll let that one slide.
It was somebody else who was working, and it was like, I'm going to pass you off to this person because I feel like you can do a better job. So I inherited them because they were given to me as a client. Passing off, yes.
Right.
But that was the biggest thing that I did with them, was like I dropped a lot of the training volume, and the response, number one, was better. But I would ask her, like, what was your normal time to complete this session? She's like, like 40-45 minutes. And I'm like, how are you getting 60 sets done in 40 minutes? Like, we just know that the load that you're choosing is inappropriate for the amount of work that you're doing. Because like, if that was me, that would take me 4 hours. Like,
that's my biggest giveaway as well, is like, when I'm like, how are you getting through your sessions in 30 or 40 minutes? And then I know they're not doing warm-up sets. So one of my favorite strategies for improving intensity in female clients is giving them 2 sets of an exercise. Because then they go, 2 sets, like, is that it? And I said, you better make them count, you know, like, build up the weight. And for a lot of the time as well, I think I collect a lot of training from my clients to see how they're moving. And I'm like, okay, you're hip thrusting 110 kilos and you're RDLing 3 kilo dumbbells. You know, it's no surprise. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's no surprise when you see swipe workouts and there's not a strain in the face from females that are uploading them. They think that that's what you're supposed to look like when you're training. And I'm like, your working sets are supposed to be challenging, and this takes time to develop. I understand, like, really knowing your own limits, and obviously there comes a time when you've got to push and pull with your own training, and that's when a more, like, you know, intellectual conversation has to be happened with your clientele to know, no, you shouldn't be like gassing yourself with an RPE of 10 for your whole training life. There has to come to different times, and of course, like, specific exercises is going to be more appropriate for that, but I still think it's just conversations that need to be had about training for women.
How rewarding is that to you when you finally get to have those conversations with people and you finally get to see them come around to what you were talking about and realize that what you were saying the whole time was right, and they start seeing the progress that you promised them that they were going to be seeing? How rewarding is that for you?
It's incredibly rewarding, because what I do now as a coach is just something I wish I had 4 or 5 years ago. Like, I wish I didn't have to sift through all the shit on T Nation to be able to come up with the training program, or to actually have something customized to me. Like, it's actually really incredibly hard to find programs that are customized to you, genuinely customized. So I think when I can see clients make the progress in 6 months that took me 2 years, like, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think we're very lucky in, like, this day and age to have access to, you know, coaching the way we do. It's come a very long way.
100%. I mean, I always tease Matt because I'm way older than him, but it's like when I first started training people, it's like we had flip phones. There were no smartphones. There were no apps. There was no remote coaching platforms. You know, so it was something we weren't ever even imagining, right? Like, you just you worked in a gym, and your clientele pool were members of that gym. Like, that was it. There was no marketing or advertising or anything. And now it's just like, you've got access to anyone, anywhere, you know, through the right strategy. So that and I mean, again, there's good and bad with that, you know, because right now it's like, you know, for every coach that, you know, especially specializes in the female population like you, there's 100 other of, you know, the toners, you know, so to speak. You know, what's it like navigating just that on social media, and kind of your experience with that? I know you've got some self-selection and stuff with your clients as they see you and they're like, oh, I want that. But what's it like just kind of going through and seeing everything else?
Yeah, I mean, like what you said, it's such a saturated space. And like, you know, it's a big change that I would like to see is just in regards to the training side of things. I think obviously with Instagram, it's a visual platform. So women look at a body and they go, oh, well, what's she doing? How can I get that? I'll buy this ebook or this program to get me to that. So, you know, and everyone goes through that sort of process. Again, that's more of a knowledge thing. And I feel like with training age and training experience, you sort of start to learn, genetics and like training age and all those sorts of things. But for me personally, like I work with a specific type of client that is ready for the style of coaching that I do. Like I don't just bring on anyone who hasn't had any experience, who only trains at home, who wants a quick fix. There's enough of that. And I remove myself from that sort of clientele. And, you know, I probably only take on 10% of the clients that actually do apply, and I redirect those ones. I'm like, look, you'd be more appropriate for in-person. I think having some in-person training to start with, or being able to navigate your way around a gym, is vital before stepping into an online coaching space. Because I sort of think, look, the 6 weeks that you're going to spend wasting time with me could be done in 2 weeks of in-person sessions. Come back to me when you're ready for that.
Yeah.
And the same as like, it seems like everyone's injured, but I don't do rehab. If you've got something that's going on, you need to see someone, because like I'm a coach, I'm a personal trainer, I'm not a physio. So I think when clients apply, like they go through an application. I also interview as well. So I get on a Zoom interview with them because I do group styled coaching as well, not just the physical stuff. I cover a lot of the mental stuff. Again, super important for women to feel like they're achieving and succeeding in what they're doing, as well as that community aspect that I do with a lot of the girls. So, you know, I like to bring women into that space that can connect with each other, that are on the same journey and feel that they can share. So I interview not just physically, but also, I guess, for a certain type of persona that could connect and they're in the right headspace.
And I think that's that one point that you brought up where you don't try to do rehab work with people is just like, I want like everybody to, that should be the title of the podcast. I'm a PT. I don't do rehab work. Like because that's the worst. I think that's the worst thing that I saw happen this past year over like with COVID is over social media. Every single personal trainer became a rehab expert like immediately. And it's one of the most frustrating things where it's should we learn how to like manage load? Yes. Should we learn how to deal with certain injuries? Yes, we should know how to train around and work around things, but not like we also need to have that ability to stay within our scope of practice and not say like, oh yeah, we can totally avoid surgery if you just train with me for 6 months. It's like, that's like the stuff like that that's happening is like, I know we're supposed to ask you what grinds your gears, but like that brought something in me. It brought something up in me. It was like that. I don't like that at all. That's not a good way to live. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of the times, like there's a difference between, like I have a little bit of lower back pain and I look at how they're doing a hip thrust or a squat and I'm like, well, that's why. Right. And then, you know, then Absolutely. There's I've got hamstring tendonitis and I'm like, just because I've had it doesn't mean I can fix you with it. And I think that's what happens a lot of the time.
Yeah. We get a lot of, I don't want to say requests, but a lot of our consultations will come in and we're looking to get the intake form and they're like, oh, my knee's hurt, or they're like list like their PRI pattern to us. And we're like, oh, you've talked to too many people. You're an accountant. You should not know what that is.
You don't need to know this.
That's a problematic thing. And that's kind of the thing that we always tell people. It's like, hey, like if you need a physical therapy, like do physical therapy. Like I'm not qualified for that. 2, I'm not interested in it at all. You know, and I think that's something that, again, like I don't know if a lot of coaches fall into that because it's more of a dependency model. Like, and again, I don't even mean consciously fall into it, but just inherently like, oh, this person needs me and I can retain longer if maybe we can kind of go that route. But man, it's rough to watch because you just see a lot of people that, you know, they'll take a 3-day seminar and then just start like trashing people that have done like 2 to 4 year programs. It's like,
absolutely.
It's that personal trainer who lives in his parents' basement who's just like, don't go to a physical therapist. He's garbage.
Yeah.
Like, bro, you've never worked with a person in person before. What are you talking about? Like,
yeah, I think ignorance is bliss as well. Like perhaps a lot of the young trainers that haven't had injury themselves or haven't worked that or experienced it, they just think, oh, it's a quick fix. And when you do know, you're like, you know, that stuff's complicated and you probably need to work with someone in person. You need to find a good practitioner, a good physio that's going to encourage movement, you know, and it's just like what you said. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with that. I can help you build a physique or do those sorts of things when you're pain-free and functioning well and ready to do that. But yeah, I always refer out.
So you kind of mentioned earlier, you alluded to just kind of the process that you use with your clients. And I think it's really interesting just based on what I've kind of seen just online and what you're talking about as far as like it's almost like there's kind of some individual training and a group component going on too. You can talk more about that and kind of how you use that to help them even more.
Yeah, so I guess the training side of thing and the nutrition and everything is one-on-one, like customized. But then I do sort of group styled coaching calls throughout the week, which is, I guess, more like growth styled coaching, growth mindset stuff. And that's the mental component of, I guess, the way that I like to coach. I just found when I was doing one-on-ones, like Zoom sessions, it was the same questions coming up. It was the same discussions that I was having. It was the same things I was explaining. And because I work with a specific persona, I guess, or type of clientele, I was like, they would just connect so well if I could put all these women in a call. They could answer each other's questions. And so that's what I do is I have group styled small calls throughout the week. And it's just built this incredible community with each other and everyone's really accepting. And I think with I remember like when I first got into the gym, it was so taboo to train and to have aesthetic goals and to lift weights as a female. And even though it's a lot better these days, it still is really difficult to find females that have the same interest. There's not many people around in your immediate groups. But when you've obviously got access to online platforms, you've got a higher chance of finding those types of people with the same interests. So that's what I do throughout the week. And I guess for a lot of my clientele, like I said, they're quite high achievers. I don't have to motivate them to train like what you guys wouldn't, you know, I'm trying to hold them back from training. And for a lot of the time, they're already ticking the boxes. Like they're hitting their macros, they're training, they're showing up, they're recovering. But I was finding, well, why aren't they feeling successful? Why are they still feeling like they're not achieving? And that's when it sort of came to my realization that, oh, they weren't sort of reflecting on, you know, their training throughout the week or what's going well or being able to, I guess, vocalize or talk or share about their training. So that's what I do is I put them all in groups and we go through sort of growth style coaching questions. The other thing I do is like I do a group webinar, which sounds like it might be similar, like with the mentoring thing that you guys do, where I just go through basic things that come up. So if I'm seeing that, you know, maybe we need more attention to warm-ups, I might go through like a lecture on, you know, different style of warm-ups or good considerations or working sets or some different things about nutrition. And I just educate in a lecture-based way and then record those. So I guess my style of coaching is very involved, and that's why it's not for everyone, because not everyone's appropriate. They don't want that, and that's fine. For me, the job is to find those people that would benefit from it.
I think that's a really cool thing that you do too, by building the community of like-minded people, because like you said, I can only imagine how interesting it is to be a woman in like a general population gym or like a Globo gym who's trying to like actually train and lift. And what that's got to be like, because you've got to be like, you basically have to become an island and you're by yourself. And then having this other group of women who are doing the same thing, but now they're international and everybody can get along and everybody can communicate. That's got to be such a cool thing for you to have built and for you to see how it's developed over the amount of the length of time that you've been doing it for. Because I think that's a very, very valuable tool that you're giving to these people, because they might not have any kind of support system with what they're trying to do any other way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And like everyone that I bring into this space, they sort of, I get a lot like, oh, I've never had anyone or any friends that think like this, because it's abnormal to have some of these goals. It's abnormal for the general population to train 5 days a week. It's not the normal. They think you're crazy. A lot of their families like, oh, you okay? Like disorders, tracking your macros. So it's that sort of way of thinking. And I like to just normalize those goals and be like, you want to change your body? That's fine. Like you want to lift weights 5 days a week? That's cool. So putting them in the community is almost like the first time they've had experience or exposure to other women that think the same. And it just normalizes those goals.
Yeah, and I just think that's a hugely powerful thing for anybody to do in any community. I mean, like that's, you look at the old school, like the old time, like bodybuilding and powerlifting gyms, and that's what it was. It was just a community of people that supported each other the entire time. And we lost that for a while with the advent of online coaching, because my coach lives in Australia and like my friend's coach lives in Germany, and we're all doing something that's so different that it's really, really hard to just have that same kind of feeling of camaraderie that you would have had if before the internet was around and before the internet training existed, where you would just go to the gym and just do what everybody else was doing. So I think that's a cool thing that with the internet is bringing around, that we can do that on a global scale.
Yeah, we're quite fortunate. And I think that's the main benefit of social media. And that's what led me to social media to begin with, to start a fitness account. I was like, I didn't know anyone in the fitness space. I didn't have any friends that sort of were into training. And then you just search fitness as a hashtag, and it's just blew up. And I was like, there's all these people that think like I did. I remember going to the Arnold Classic. I don't know if you guys know what that is. In Melbourne, we have a really big Arnold Classic. And when I first started lifting, I went down to Melbourne and went to the Arnold Classic, and it just blew my mind. I was like, whoa, what is all of this? Because before social media and Instagram, like how else would you know?
Yeah, you wouldn't. Like it's like we talked about, like unless you were at a gym where everybody else was doing the same thing, you would have just thought you were the odd one out and be like, okay, well, I guess I'm the only one like this that wants to do something that I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure.
So you, in addition to all of that, you have a podcast yourself, correct? So yeah. Talk about that, because you're a veteran. What you can give us some pointers. We get some pointers off of you.
We're new.
We're new to this, and that's kindly.
12 months veteran.
Yeah, that's
more veteran than we are.
Very much, yes. Like 12 times more veteran than us.
Kyle and I even had a discussion originally about like, should Matt even be allowed on the podcast, or should we just keep him hidden in the basement somewhere? He can do the intro and then never come back.
And then we decided I'm too introverted to run one of these by myself, so I need Matt to fill space,
Yeah, so myself and Danny, who's my co-host, we have a podcast called the Level Up Podcast, and we started it 12 months ago, actually. Both of us love, obviously, educating, and I think anyone that steps into the podcasting space talking as well, but Instagram it's not the platform. Do you know what I mean? It's not the platform for long-winded discussions. And and you guys too, like you get questions and I'm like, how am I going to summarize this in a 15-second story? I can't. Like, you want me to talk about sleep? Like, I need like an hour plus to give you the basics. So that's where the podcast was sort of born out of, was just wanting to expand on some of these questions that come through Instagram. And me and Danny are very much like yin and yang. We work really well together. And I just said to Danny one day, I said, do you want to start a podcast? Let's just do it. And we had no idea what we were doing, very much just rocked up, recorded a few episodes, and the response has been really good, because I've like listened to podcasts for years. I love podcasts, but it was hard to find like a fitness one for women, like and hosted by women. And I actually sort of don't listen to any by women. So I was like, there's like a gap, a void here. I would love to just bring some attention and have like, you know, women's health and fitness podcast that wasn't just fitness, I guess. And that's why we went with Level Up, because we do a lot about mindset. We also talk about competing when we're sort of both in season, and obviously training and nutrition. And yeah, so it just gives us another voice and another platform to be able to share more content and connect with our audience as well.
I mean, that's why we started a podcast. Is like, number one, it's a great way to hang out with your friends. Just get to sit down and talk to people and have a good time talking to them. But number two, it's exactly what you said. It's like the question of what do you think about sleeping more? On like, how are you going to answer that in a 15-second story? It's like, yeah, sleep's great. Get more of it. Like, I don't know what to say. Like,
yeah,
it's almost to the point where like you said, you need that like hour-long episode to be able to talk about anything like that at all. And I think that's exactly why we got into ours. Is we just get so many questions and so many people that would want to talk about other things that it's impossible to just cover all that same content on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well, it's given us the opportunity to interview so many incredible guests and learn so much for ourselves. Like, that was one of our main things. I was like, I want to chat to such and such. I want to know this for myself. I want to be able to ask them the questions. And then I also want to be able to share that with my audience, because I know that they're going to benefit and go on that journey with me as well. So, you know, a bit of both. Like, I think we get into this space because we enjoy doing it. We enjoy talking to people, we enjoy interviewing. And then it's like, why not just hit record and share that with everyone else as well?
100%. Yeah. I mean, is it time for the real question?
I think it's time for the only scripted question.
I keep asking questions that aren't the real question. I can just
like, come on, Kyle.
So as we kind of mentioned before we started recording, the only real question that we have that we ask every single podcast is, you know, when you look at the fitness space, or you look even at the in-person gyms that you train yourself at, you know, what are the things that, you know, grind your gears, you know, as far as what do you see that's just frustrating, you know, to either yourself or the industry or just training philosophy, whatever it might be?
If it's a specific person or group, call them out and name names, because we'll just host a debate on the next one.
Yeah,
I think it's Kyle. He really grinds me.
I found out recently I grind a lot of people's gears, apparently.
I'm just noticing as well, it says Kyle is small.
That's my name. That's whenever I log into Zoom and I have to go through Kyle's account, I always set my name to be Kyle is small, because it's just my subtle way of always reminding him.
Right. All right. This is distracting there. So when I thought of this, two things came, like, I've got two things that sort of grind my gears. And I think I've already elaborated on one about just training and what's sold to women as being the ideal way to train. And I just wish that, like, the volume didn't jack up and the intensity didn't go through the roof, and there wasn't this way that women thought they needed to train. So I would love for training as a whole to change, like to think more cerebrally about exercise selection, about intensity, about progressive overload and mesocycles and phases, rather than just rocking up and saving a workout on Instagram and getting through it. So the whole training component, I would love to shift, and it already has started to, I must admit. Like, the last few years, clientele and clients are becoming more aware through social media of what's appropriate, and that plyometric box jumps aren't great for glute hypertrophy, and that these sorts of things are becoming more mainstream, because there was a huge phase where it was just like booty burnouts and frog pumps and bands were all that women knew. And it was advertised and promoted by people with incredible bodies. So I don't blame women for thinking that that's the way to achieve that physique. So that's something that still grinds my gears. And the other thing that I was going to say is just something that I see a lot of is just the difference, or I guess the separation between the people who have all the knowledge and then the fitspos that are promoting that style. And there's just no interconnection. And the people with all the knowledge are speaking to each other, and then they're not communicating effectively enough to the general population to be able to distribute that knowledge. So I would love to see a bit more of a connection with the evidence-based community and general population. And I think places like this, podcasts, like influencers who want to educate, that's how we sort of break that barrier.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing with social media is everybody just exists in their own little echo chamber where it's just me talking to Kyle, talking to you, talking to me, talking to Kyle, talking to you, talking to me. And it's cyclical in nature where the people that are viewing your stories are always the same people. And the people that are liking and commenting on your posts are always the same people. And breaking out of those boxes is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And it's always interesting because when you start to try to break out of those boxes, the people that were in your echo chamber before almost immediately turn their backs on you and like betray and then act like this person ain't shit. Like, look at them. They're trying to talk to like normal people anymore. It's like, well, you aren't paying my bills. The general population is paying my bills. So I have to make my content more relatable. So what do you think if anybody, like anybody who's listening to this is trying to get into that and trying to break through and get out of their echo chamber, what do you think what would some advice that you would have for that person be to get out of what they're trying to do and just change their messaging?
As in the evidence base to try and be able to
communicate. Yeah, exactly. So like what could you do what do you think they could do to better improve their communication skills with the general population?
Yeah, I think something that's really powerful is connecting with influencers and these people that do have the audience, and aiming to educate and add value to them so that they can better educate their audience as well. That's a big frustration for me. When I went through coaching, there was no like explanation as to why we were doing what we're doing. And that's probably fueled into me as to why I'm so involved in my own coaching to educate, because we have to understand why we're doing what we're doing to be able to teach it to other people. So I think just relaying like what you're doing here with the podcast, interviewing different types of people and stepping out of your comfort zones to connect with other people, to be able to educate in a different way, in a different style, using like social media, like stories, Instagram boxes, reels, so that we can make content in a more digestible way for general population. I think as well, it's really easy to forget. For me, it's easy to forget that there are women that think that lifting weights makes you bulky. Like I used to think that. And as the more knowledge that you get, this sort of further away from that way of thinking you move from, but it still definitely exists. So for me, I like to, I guess, make sure that the language that I use on my stories or social media, for example, or on the podcast is as basic as it needs to be. I don't need to use big words. I want to educate people. And to do that, I need to simplify it as much as I can to reach a wider audience. So there are a lot of incredibly intelligent people that I have a lot of respect for and that I follow and I take a lot of information from, but even sometimes it goes in one ear and out the other for me. And I'm like, I know what they're sort of saying, but I might have to actually do a bit of research to really be able to digest that content. And for me, I sort of think, well, if I can't understand it, there's a huge percentage of the population who aren't in the coaching space or that don't do a lot of research or aren't training or exercising that aren't going to understand any of that. And therefore, the argument is not even an argument. They're just arguing with themselves. And I see that a lot on Instagram, is like a lot of bickering and a lot of fights about the smallest details with the biggest intentions to help general population, but it's not.
But then how are you going to get validated by your coaching friends who are like, oh, she's so smart? And like, how else are you going to get that validation? I mean, if you don't use big words.
I know, I really should. It's all for the ego though, isn't it?
Exactly. It has nothing to do with actually helping people. I want the likes and saves from my coaching peers. I don't want anybody to be better because of me. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. I think it comes down to like, really, really wanting to help people though, doesn't it? Like there's a difference between wanting like a blue tick on Instagram or just wanting respect from everyone in the evidence-based community or helping people, because at the end of the day, the people like us, it's such a small percentage. Like not everyone loves training. Not everyone wants to go into the gym. And I think that's forgotten about. There's a reason why a lot of these really simple ways and quick fixes and challenges are so effective. And that's because that is the way a majority of people think. They want a result quickly. So why would they want to adopt our training principles when it looks hard? So it's about educating them about the important variables that are going to matter most.
Yeah. It's always in the back of my head, and I'm not always conscious of it when I'm posting things, when I'm talking to people, but it's, you know, as soon as you're out like in a social event or you're talking to like non-trainer people and you're like, oh, I'm a weird.
Yeah.
I'm a little weird. And it's like, we look at something online and we're like, oh, that looks hard. I'm gonna try that.
I want to do that.
And other people look at stuff online like, oh, that looks hard.
Other people don't even see that on Instagram. They don't even know what that space looks like.
It's gone, you know. I think that's something that a lot of, you know, we work with our people in our mentorship a lot because they're all coaches, and you know, it's like, what do you do for fun? Oh, well, I train. And okay, so what do you do for work? Well, I train other people. And who are all your friends and who do you hang out with? Oh, trainers. It's like, oh,
yeah,
cool, man.
And it's dangerous when you've just got that one perspective. And I think, like, before I was in the coaching space, I was working as a nurse and a midwife, and like that was in hospitals. It's general population, you know, and it sort of was like common sense is common for a lot of people in health, let alone fitness. So that, for me, like having that other lens as well has really helped me sort of come in to be like health first, and like what general population actually is, because it's not the fitness bubble that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah. I think that's the actual title of the podcast. Common sense isn't common.
We can use that one.
I think we can use that one.
Yeah. We'll settle for that.
Awesome. Well, we know that you're getting ready to start your day and we're ending our day. So we definitely want to be sensitive to your time as well. But thank you so much for coming on. And where can everybody find all your stuff if you want to be found?
There's
you
only
don't want
one
our
of
listeners.
Why not? Bring them in. They sound like fun.
There's like two of them. That's why. It's usually just me and Kyle are the only ones that listen to this podcast.
I might listen too. That'll be 3. I might have to listen.
Perfect. 50% increase in listenership.
Yes.
But I guess I'm most active on Instagram, and it's just Sharelle Grant. There's only one user on there with my title. My podcast is the Level Up Podcast with Sharelle and Danny, and you can find that on all the main platforms, the podcast app and Spotify. And then my website as well is just sharellegrant.com. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And it's been great, guys. Thanks for sitting down. It's been really good to connect with you both.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.